Hello everyone, this is Caleb Simpson, and you are watching my 100% walkthrough for The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword for Nintendo Wii. In the last several videos, we completed the Eldin and Faron portions of the Song of the Hero, so now we're finally moving on to Lanayru, and that's what this whole video is going to be about. You can complete any of the three regions in any order you like, however, in Lanayru there is a game-breaking glitch that can screw up your game and break your game file, and you will be unable to continue. So, I recommend you save Lanayru for last because of that, and that's what I have recommended in the previous video. So I'm going to go into detail explaining what that glitch is now. I've just been kind of avoiding the topic, and I've just been kind of talking about it vaguely thus far. So, there is a character in Lanayru named Gorko, and he has a chapel above his head, and if you speak with him after completing the Lanayru portion, but before completing Eldin or Faron, it will then break your game. I'm actually not entirely sure exactly what happens. I think what it is, from my understanding, just from the vague words I've seen online, is I think that it makes it so that when you go to Eldin, that whole volcano scene where it blows you off course and then you're stuck in the prison or whatever doesn't actually happen. And then likewise, when you go to Faron, you don't actually fight in Prison 3 and you don't have Faron flooded at all. So I think that's what happens. So it just breaks those whole cutscenes and whatever, and then it never happens. So here we are in Lanayru, and here's that character Gorko that I was talking about. He has a chapel above his head, and you can speak with him. This time is fine. If you help Lanayru, the dragon here in Lanayru region, and then you speak with Gorko, that is what breaks the game. And again, it only does that if you have not completed the Faron or Eldin portions yet. That is the combination that is bad. So if you just avoid Gorko after completing Lanayru, then you're fine, or if you just complete the Faron or Eldin portions first. So yeah, the easiest solution to tell people is just to do the areas in order, and then it's fine, and then there's no way that you could possibly encounter this glitch, so that's why I recommended that. But yeah, if you're watching this and you want to do it in another order, that's totally fine. Just make sure you don't talk to Gorko after completing this region. This particular conversation is activated automatically when you use the claw shot target. As soon as you land, then Gorko will start talking to you. Now, this particular conversation is not game-breaking, and it wouldn't matter for me anyways, because I've already done everything in the proper order, so it wouldn't break anything. But anyways, you can optionally speak with him at this point, and it doesn't really matter, and that is only if you came to this location. Now, this is, I think it's called Desert Entrance off the top of my head. It might be called, the bird statue might be called Lanayru Mines. I'm actually not sure off the top of my head. Regardless, if you do not have this bird statue, you would have to go back through the mines or back through the caves in order to reach this. Actually, I don't think you can go through the caves. I think it's you drop off and then land down there. So maybe this is the only way to get here. Anyways, regardless, so that would be how you'd get here, and the only reason I'm coming back here is to get this treasure chest that is up on this ledge. I mentioned earlier in the walkthrough that I was going to get it at a different time, and I actually forgot when I was here at the time that we were going to the Lanayru Sea. I was going to take that other side entrance to go over here, and I didn't do that. But yeah, totally optional. You don't have to get this chest. It doesn't really matter. So you can either come here, or you can take the other bird statue, which is, I believe, called Desert West. It's like just before we enter the Temple of Time area, there's a bird statue there right next to the sandfall. And that one would also allow you to get over to the caves. And I'll show how to get there in a second. So if you took this bird statue right at the entrance, then how you would get to our next destination is you follow this upper path using the claw shot targets back and forth, and this leads all the way to Lanayru Caves. So this area right here is where Gorko will be later in the game, where you don't want to talk to him. This is where that game-breaking glitch takes place. So that is after you've completed Lanayru. If you speak with him right here before completing Faron or Eldin, it will break your game. So don't do that. Avoid this at all cost. So if you're confused about how to get to Lanayru Caves as well, here's the other way to get there, is you take the bird statue labeled as West Desert, and then from here you can get up to this little area where there's the sandfall. And this is right before we get over to where the entrance to the Temple of Time is. So that is how you get up here. So you take that bird statue. Otherwise, if you don't have that bird statue either, you can take the North Desert, travel along here, jump down. You can claw shot across this bridge, head over here, climb up, and then you can get to the sandfall. There's a claw shot target here you can use to reach this upper ledge where you can get to the desert caves. So at this point of the Song of the Hero, Gorko is actually not here in Lanayru Caves at all, so we don't have to worry about him. And now that he's no longer in front of that little patch straight ahead, there's actually some cracked rocks that are underneath inside this little hole here, and we can actually use the bomb flowers to blow it up. This will allow us to run through, and then we can proceed to the next area at long last. So it's kind of funny, like we actually technically would have had access to this if Gorko just wasn't there, so we could have skipped ahead to portions of the Song of the Hero, but they just had this, like, character there in the way for no reason, you know. Anyways, whatever. And maybe it's, you know, I assume they're kind of like implying that he like dug it up a little bit further, so now we finally have access to it, but really it was just already like that. It's just the fact that his feet were in the way. You could see this little patch of like cracked blocks that could blow up through between his legs and stuff. Now before you continue, you do want to play your harp for the Blessed Butterflies here to reveal a gossip stone that will give you a treasure, and then you can also talk to it, and it will give you a clue about how to use goddess walls to get bombs. So as soon as you enter this new area, then Fi will tell you that it is called Lanayru Gorge, and the bird statue here is also called Lanayru Gorge. However, I do find that slightly confusing because when you first see the bird statue in the Temple of Time area, I think that it actually, when you warp to it, it's called Temple of Time, but when you first speak with it, the icon that pops up calls it Desert Gorge, as opposed to Lanayru Gorge, which is confusing. So there's two different gorges in Lanayru, but anyway, yeah, it's just a little bit confusing. So I always found that a little bit odd and made me wonder, but it could be too that it's just a bad translation or for this particular version of the game. I know I've seen that happen in Majora's Mask because I played the European release as well as the USA one, and some of the signs are different because they fixed it in whatever, I can't even remember which one it was. One of them, whatever one released later, is the one that they fixed a lot of the signs on so that's actually labeled properly. Unfortunately, in this particular example, the game-breaking glitch still managed to pass through the cracks, but, overall, though, Nintendo does a really good job of making sure their games are pretty darn bug-free for the most part, compared to other companies, so they do a really good job with that. I've been playing a lot of Ark Survival Evolved lately, and that game is just seriously a terrarium for bugs. But it's honestly part of what makes it fun, though. It's just goofy stuff happens all the time. You smack a rock and it goes flying at 30 million miles an hour, It's ridiculous. Or you break a rock and then the pieces grow to be 20 times their normal size. And and it freaks you out because it just startles you because it happens so suddenly and it makes no sense. It lands on top of your house. It's bigger than your house is, and then it disappears. The fragments of the rock, Just weird stuff like that happens all the time. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is that a mislabeled bird statue is just not a big deal. It's small potatoes in the general scheme of things, especially compared to other things that could be wrong. But anyways, so this game's actually pretty darn, solid and it works well. So in Lanayru Gorge, you can run forward and inspect the bones of Lanayru. The dragon is apparently not alive, which is bad. So to continue onwards, you've got to go off to the right, and there is a nearby bomb flower that you can grab using the beetle, and you can smack that into the nearby rocks to blow them up so you can jump across. Now, alternatively, you can actually set down a bomb and then pick it up with your beetle as well. That is a little bit more difficult, though, but it is possible. So to continue onwards, though, what we need to do is we need to find a small key in order to unlock the door. And if you travel down this path down here where there's a boulder, I assume they have the boulder here just to draw your attention, but you don't necessarily need to push the boulder off the ledge or anything. There's nothing you need to do with it. But they bring it over here so that you can inspect it, and also the soft soil location just to draw your attention to the fact that there is a sparkling thing in the distance. You want to use your beetle to collect the small key, and you actually can just stop using the beetle immediately. As soon as you touch something with the beetle, it'll automatically come to you and be part of your inventory or whatever. So if you just stop using the beetle as soon as you collect it, it will automatically appear in your hands the next time your perspective changes back to Link. So go through the locked door and use the P-hats and the targets to continue on to the next area. Now this particular section of the game I think is honestly one of the hardest parts of the entire game. We have this very limited amount of time to proceed through this next area, and I just think it's quite difficult. What you want to do is you want to smack the time shift stone in the middle of this minecart, and I would recommend that you recalibrate your controller right now before you start, because we won't really get much of an opportunity from here on out. Alright, so how this works is you stab the minecart, and then after this it will only begin moving after you speak with the robot nearby. And it actually starts moving away before the robot's even done speaking, so it's continuing to speak even after the past field moves away from it, and it's back in the present again, which is kind of weird. It doesn't make any sense at all. Whatever. So this robot informs you that this time shift stone is en route to meet up with the Thunder Dragon, which is exactly where we want it to go, so that's awesome. So we definitely want to escort this time shift stone where it needs to go. This will allow us to actually bring Lanayru back from the dead temporarily anyways, so we can at least interact with him, and it's kind of a weird thing. Now we're actually using time shift stones to restore people, not just enemies and not just robots, so it kind of brings up this interesting point, though, of why doesn't the time shift area affect us, Is it because we have the Master Sword or something? It makes me wonder if it's sort of like the Moon Pearl from A Link to the Past or something. In this room, there's a bunch of enemies that will appear, and all of them are actually vulnerable right as they're appearing. So if you use a spin attack, especially on these Bokoblins, right as they're appearing, you can honestly use it a little bit early. The Bokoblin will appear and they'll already be in your radius, and you'll defeat them immediately. So that's super nice. It can make this a lot easier. You can actually just kind of hide in the background, really far away, and that will work as well because the minecart will be far enough away that the enemy doesn't see you. If you can get the enemy back in the sandy area, then it's just going to disappear anyways. And here my controller got really uncalibrated again, so I could not do horizontal or vertical slashes. So here's a little trick. If that starts happening to you, what you can do is do spin attacks, because spin attacks prioritizes the horizontal and vertical attacks. There is no diagonal spin attack, so it chooses one or the other. So if you're getting to a point where your controller is uncalibrated, that's a little trick you can use to defeat a lot of enemies in the game. Honestly, there's only a couple enemies in the game where you actually have to do diagonal attacks. In fact, the only enemies I can even think of is there's some ropes you have to slash, and then there's the Staldras, and then some of the Girahim battles are like that, where you have to use diagonal attacks. But otherwise, every other enemy is either horizontal or vertical. So if your sword is getting really uncalibrated and it's not working properly, then spin attacks is a way you can circumvent that and get around that problem. For this next section, we need to make use of the claw shots and grapple onto vines a whole bunch, such as this little point where we initiated up here. You want to claw shot to the vines up above to land on the platform where there's a floor switch that will open the door. So do so, and then you need to follow the time shift stone into the next room, where there's a bunch of platforms that steadily appear and disappear as the time shift stone passes by it. So you do need to stay within the radius of the past, otherwise the platforms will disappear underneath you and you'll fall into the abyss. It's actually not too bad because, this honestly was happening earlier, actually. We had sand and other platforms we were on in the previous rooms that were doing the same thing. It's just more noticeable in this room. And for the most part, there's actually not much you have to do. You just have to make sure you're staying ahead of the platform before it goes away. But it's actually not too big a deal, and honestly, there's only a couple enemies along the way, such as that Dekubaba right there. After you defeat it, you want to go ahead and use the claw shots on the vines on the left side, so we can get up on this upper platform and open the next door. So next, you want to work your way from right to left using the vines across the way. So grapple onto them, and then ideally what you do is you get the stamina fruit along the way. It's not really too big a deal. If you miss a couple of them, it's alright, and you should have more than enough stamina. In particular, if you're not dashing. When you use the Wiimote to leap back and forth, you consume more stamina. If you're just climbing regularly, you don't use as much. Just want to make sure, too, that you watch out for gaps in between these gusts of air at these gaps, and otherwise you could end up falling into the abyss and you'd have to start this section over again. Also, just make sure you're waiting long enough for the past field to create vines on the opposing side, otherwise you'll jump into nothing, you won't have anything to grab onto, and you'll fall down and have to start the section over again. Once you reach the platforms, just hop down and turn around to see a target in the distance. Unfortunately, it's all grayed out, so we can't actually use it. You have to wait for the past field to reach it so that we can access it. Whenever we get to these claw shot sections where you claw shot back and forth, I can't help but think about the City in the Sky from Twilight Princess, which had the same thing. Ironically enough, that game was actually the one that had more of like a definitive, like really short time limit where you could be on the targets. This game certainly is a lot more forgiving with that, and you can hang out there as long as you want, which is kind of ironic because Skyward Sword has a stamina meter, and when you're on vines, you can't actually climb for very long, yet you can hang on to claw shot targets for as long as you want. Kind of ironic. You'd think it'd be the other way around, where Twilight Princess would let you hang out for as long as you want, and Skyward Sword, meanwhile, would make you run out of stamina while you're using targets, but it's not that way at all. Now, of course, this is timed because of just the fact that we're waiting on the time field, and if you wait too long, then you will fall into the abyss because the target you're currently on will fade out. Now, all these thunder keys in this particular section will just disappear as soon as the time field gets in their range, so you actually don't have to do anything with them. You can completely ignore them, which is interesting. I think that's kind of a cool effect. Like, when I first saw them, I was really worried, but it's actually not a big deal at all. Now, once you get to the vines, there's actually a trick here. This next room has a bunch of chews up ahead, and they can intercept you, and you'd have to defeat them or just maneuver past them and stuff like that. But there's a little trick where you can actually just hang back a little bit and then just run past the chews once you have enough land. So ideally, you wait until you're behind the minecart and then run past it, and this way you can avoid dealing with the chews at all. And same thing with these Dekubabas up ahead. You don't actually have to fight them at all, so if you just maneuver past them, then you're just good to go. There's two parts of this escort quest that are pretty darn stressful, and I think this is the next upcoming section is one of them. What you want to do is whip out that whip and use it on the pulley and then pull it down in order to open the gate, and that will start this section. Now, there is a chew that is on the ceiling on the right side. You can actually hang on to the left side to avoid it entirely. You don't even have to face it. And then up ahead, we have some spike traps. Now, these guys are pretty easy to avoid. Just in general, the one thing I will comment on with these is don't hang out in the middle. Rather, what you want to do is you want to go to either side, either left or right side. I usually go on the right side because it's closer to our destination in this case. But either way, up ahead there is a Techno Blend. You want to use a spin attack to defeat it real quick. Now, this is actually a checkpoint right here. If you fall into an abyss up ahead, then you will just reappear at this section. You want to whip the next branch and then use it to get across, and there is a ancient flower here, usually, not always. You can ignore that Dekubaba, it doesn't matter. You want to go ahead and whip the next branch, and then up ahead there's a whole bunch of those spike traps. Now, like I said, I don't think that it's good to face forward. If you're facing forward, I think the depth perception is a little bit weird on it. So I actually recommend either facing towards the middle, and you want to stay on either side, either the right or left side, and then be right up against the wall. And you can either face towards the middle, or you can face towards the wall. Now, personally, I generally think that facing towards the wall is a little bit easier, whatever you want to do. Now here, there's a little trick. If you can dash ahead of the minecart and then dash through the sand, you can actually get up on this next platform before the electricity appears. Now, that is very tricky to pull off, so I don't necessarily expect most people to be able to do that. It's very tricky, so most likely you're going to experience this, where you have to wait for the electricity to disappear, and then you want to quickly make a dash for the stamina fruit along the way. So just keep collecting them as you go, keep dashing up here until eventually you reach this upper section. Now, before you pull that lever, I would recommend that you grab these heart flowers real quick. So dash up there and grab the lever or use the whip on it, either way, and then quickly jump down and go into this next section, which is, I think, probably the hardest room in the entirety of Skyward Sword. Now, my recommendation for dealing with Technoblins, there's a bunch of different ways you can deal with them. However, these guys appear very quickly, so what I'd recommend you do is actually just use spin attacks. So you can do that as soon as they appear really quick, and that works great. Otherwise, you can back up, so you like backflip away from them or whatever, and then you can just quickly turn around and spin attack, and that would take care of them pretty easily. So you can like backflip away from them, spin attack right as they're running towards you, and they're vulnerable while they're still running at you, and that works pretty good. A lot of these BMOs you can actually completely ignore, and they're actually kind of work to your advantage. Like this one is on the path, so it will stop the minecart, so it gives you a little bit of a breather, as long as you stay far enough back that it can't see you. Now this Centro, you don't actually have to defeat it, you can totally ignore it, although it is very frustrating and confusing. Now, whenever you have rupees out in the sand, too, you can also use the beetle, and I used that here to get some extra rupees. You might as well. This is kind of an interesting thing. Like I said, you don't have to defeat that Centrobe. There's only one point in the game where a Centrobe where a shield is required, as far as I know. It's the only place I can think of is a Centrobe in the Lanayru mining facility. This is the only place where a shield is required, assuming you're not using glitches anyways. I know sometimes people get riled up at my use of that word glitches. They're like, no, it's not a glitch, it's an exploit. Yeah, whatever. You know, potatoes. You know what I'm talking about. So BMOs can be defeated three different ways. You can either sneak up on them and then just attack them from behind, you can shoot them in the eye with arrows, or you can use shield bashes to reflect their attacks and get close. And I think, honestly, like, shield bashes are my new favorite way of doing this. I actually didn't even realize that was an option the first couple times I played this game, but in my recent playthroughs I've been using it a lot, and I think it's just great. Like, one of the nice things about shield bashes is, like, if you're facing other enemies, as long as you make sure that the other enemy you're targeting is on the same side as the BMOs, then you're guaranteed that when you do shield bash, you can reflect its attack, even if you are currently dealing with another enemy, such as a Technoblin. So it's, like, really good. Even if you're surrounded by enemies, a shield bash will work against the BMOs, and it works great. So that being said, my advice for this room, if you're stressed out about it and you're like, oh no, this BMOS is in my face and I can't get out my bow in time, there's other enemies, you know, just use a shield bash. It'll work great. So that would be my big recommendation for how to get through that room. But yeah, I will say that I think that room is actually one of the hardest rooms in Skyward Sword, and honestly, maybe even Zelda in general. It's like just really difficult to get through that, and a lot of players end up like trying that a bunch of different times. So I hope my tips will help you get through that. Something I will say is that, like, I feel like that kind of challenge is like really good, or like I would almost rather have more rooms like that for, like, say the Cave of Ordeals and Twilight Princess. I think that was way more challenging, what we just did. Although, like, the darkness at the bottom of the Cave of Ordeals was pretty good, I guess. But, like, instead of the Savage Labyrinth, or, like, I mean, I realize, though, that takes less development time, so, like, they can produce more content with, like, less effort. But even just a really simple designed room where there's some challenging mechanics like that, like, if there's something that they tried to do, and it ended up being, like, they're like, oh, that's way too hard. If they included it for a challenge like that, I think that would almost be kind of cool. Like, and use that as, like, the really hard, challenging thing that you do at the end of the game for some, you know, obscure item, whatever. So here I was trying to use this bomb flower to blow up these rocks, and apparently I hit, like, the base of the platform, and it made it so that the explosion radius didn't actually blow up the rocks. I'm not really sure what the deal is with that, so I had to try again. And again, with all of these kind of puzzles, you can actually set down a bomb and use the beetle to pick it up directly, and that does work. There was another jelly blob right there. I don't think I saw it in time, but yeah, so I apparently walked right past that. But that Deku Baba also dropped a jelly blob. I was trying to get one earlier by using the beetle, and I didn't get the beetle out in time. Technically, another option for dealing with those Deku Babas and the Quadra Babas, you could actually use the beetle. However, I think the beetle is a lot easier to use with that technique if you are further away from the Deku Baba. We just really don't have a lot of time, so I still think that Sword Slashes are the way to go. And again, if you're unsure, like, you can totally just use a spin attack, works really well too, because it's a little bit easier. You don't accidentally do diagonal attacks like I was explaining earlier. So if you're struggling with those Quadra Baba and Deku Babas, then you might want to try spin attacks instead. Oh wow, I can't believe I never actually thought about this before. I just realized another way of dealing with those Deku Babas, and particularly the Quadra Baba at the end too, is you could just use bombs. So if you're struggling there and you're, like, stressed out trying to figure out how to get through that path quickly enough, you can just throw a bomb and they'll automatically reach up and grab it, and then as soon as it blows up, then they'll instantly kill them. So like the Quadra Baba that has more health, it will instantly die if you use a bomb. So that's another way of getting through that real quick, I guess. As long as you're far enough back that the explosion radius doesn't blow you up, then that's totally an option for you. I find this part kind of interesting. The robots here say they got permission from Master Lanayru to dig up time shift stones, so that explains partly why there are at least some of the robots digging up time shift stones anyways. I don't know if their whole operation is based on that. They have said earlier that the robots, that their power source is the time shift stones, And I'm not sure quite how that works exactly, because I don't know if they only existed in the past or if just their existence itself is the fact that they have power within the, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if they just run around and they just have power when they're within the field, and that's actually how that works, or they actually only had power in the past. I don't know. I don't know how that works. Regardless, they were trying to bring a time shift stone over here to Lanayru because he is sick. Lanayru himself will explain that he is unable to teach you the next part of the Song of the Hero because he's just too sick to really belt out a song, which seems kind of weird. Like, even if he could hum it for you, wouldn't that be good enough? But whatever, you know, the world's ending and everything, but, you know, this is more important. Not that I'm saying we shouldn't save him, but just seems like his priorities are a little bit odd to me. Even if he struggles with it, it's still better than nothing or something. I don't know. Regardless, the first time you talk with Lanayru, he will just explain that he can't really sing for you. The second time you speak with him, he will actually talk about how the robots are planting a seedling from the Tree of Life, and this will allow them to get some life tree fruit that will hopefully heal him. However, it just won't grow here in Lanayru, so it's not doing so hot. Or rather, too hot, considering it's in a desert, you know? It kind of makes sense. Actually, deserts can have pretty extreme temperatures of hot and cold, like you see this in Breath of the Wild. That's actually true in real life. Part of the reason for that, actually, is having, like, big, flat ground with not a lot of mountains in particular, and not near the ocean. When you have a lot of stuff inland, tends to have more extreme temperatures, and it doesn't have a lot of high and low pressure zones. It's part of what causes the conditions that are necessary to cause a desert to form. Anyways, so that all being said, actually, probably the reason that Lanayru is a desert in the first place is because the sand sea became a sand sea. When it was an ocean in the past, that's part of what regulated the temperature and kept this land from deteriorating and becoming really extreme. But now that it all became a sand sea instead, it kind of screwed it all up, and that's partly why it's all barren now. Kind of interesting. I think it's actually kind of cool. I had never considered that before, but as I started thinking about it, it makes a lot of sense. I actually find it really impressive how Nintendo games do this a lot, in Zelda in particular, where the developers actually kind of paid attention. If you actually, like, know a little more of the science behind how some things work, it's actually pretty, like, they're very intentional with how they made this game. And I think that's really cool. Like, I like when they actually, like, get their facts sort of straight, you know? I realize it's ridiculous, you know, we have time shift stones and all this, but there's some aspects of it aren't ridiculous, actually, and are totally believable. So, in order to proceed, if you look to the southwest of Lanayru Gorge, you'll see there's actually a dead tree here, and there's not a lot of trees in Lanayru in general, so that's probably where the robots were trying to plant the life tree sapling. So head over there, there's some sand you can gust bellow out of the way, and there's a time shift stone that'll bring this area to the past. Be sure to grab all of the ancient flowers around. I was actually super lucky here. I got like 4 of them or 5 of them, whatever. And then make sure to Skyward Strike that goddess cube there. This is the 27th one, which is the final one in the entire game. This particular goddess cube leads to a small quiver, which I will be getting later on in this chapter. Now, next you want to go ahead and dig up the life tree sapling. There's a robot here who will yell at you, and this is before the tree is formed. It's kind of cool because now you use the time shift stone, and there's no longer a dead tree here, which is cool. I actually think this small mechanic is super interesting. I always thought it'd be really cool to, like, one of my ideas for a dungeon in a Zelda game is I think it'd be sweet to have a dungeon that works kind of similar to time shift stones, or maybe the whole area comes to the past or whatever, but that the dungeon itself is Hyrule Field. Like, you're running through these ruins the whole game, like in Twilight Princess kind of format, you know, where you're running through the Hyrule Field over and over, and you keep going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and then finally you hit a time, you gain access to being able to use time shift stones, and it turns out Hyrule Field, the place you've been running through the whole time, is a dungeon. It's like super cool. I just think that idea is super exciting to me, and it's something I always thought would be really cool. Like, and the ability to do things like redirect just a little like river, not a river, but like a little pond thing where you redirect the flow of water, and then when you go back to the future, it's like a big gorge instead, and then, like, you know, or a big river. That's an actual, like, big thing instead of this little teeny, you know, it like wore away the stones and stuff. So you can just move things around in the past, just little things. And there's the Crescent Island in Oracle of Ages is kind of like that a little bit, where you move a lot of little seeds around to make little vines you can climb up. It's kind of like that. I'm thinking like a more extreme example. And it doesn't have to be like super graphically intense or whatever. It can literally just be like the land is flipped as far as like programming. Just so the developers don't spend a lot of time like handcrafting all this stuff, you know? I think it's totally doable, and I just think that'd be such a sweet idea. But yeah, I like the idea of being able to, like, say you go buy seeds, kind of like you did for the magic beans in Ocarina of Time, but instead of, like, it making a floating plant, instead it just makes vines grow up the wall. And it could be the same, like, level of distance, just so they don't have to, like, reprogram it or make it super fancy or whatever. But you can make vines grow up on various walls, and so depending on where, maybe you have a limited number of them or something, or maybe you pick them up and move them or something. But if you have a limited number of them or whatever, then you can choose which, like, part of the dungeon you want to go up. So you're going back and forth between the past and the present like you do in Oracle of Ages, but you're doing that in a 3D environment. And I like the idea of like how you use the map in Lanayru here, where you can see where you can walk on the sand, where it's actually safe to go from your map. Even your map doesn't actually match what the present looks like. It shows what the past looked like, even though you can't actually go to the past in Lanayru for that portion of the Lanayru Desert. But anyways, so just that kind of idea where basically you see Hyrule Field, you have that map at first, but then you get the dungeon map, and now you can see where the rooms are in the dungeon. So when you're walking around Hyrule Field, the map shows you in the middle of different rooms. So depending on where you stand, when you make it go back to the past, you can appear in different rooms in the dungeon. So it's just weird because the dungeon is actually completely open in the present. You see what I mean? It's like open field. It's just such a weird concept, and I think that's a really interesting mechanic for a dungeon. Make the dungeon have like a couple different levels. So when you go to the past, you always, because the field is open, it's all just grassland, whatever, you always appear in the past on the bottom floor. Anyway, so like the trick of the dungeon is actually trying to get up in elevation is actually what you're trying to do. You're trying to go up. In case you can't tell, I'm really excited with this idea. I have a bunch of other ideas for dungeons as well. I debated about like, would you guys like that if I did some kind of like bloggy video just ranting about some different ideas I have for dungeons? So here I'm doing something very important. I decided that I needed to kill all the butterflies, and what I'm doing is I'm walking away from them slowly so that I don't startle them. And it's very important. Now here I actually thought there was a Gossip Stone. I mentioned it earlier in the walkthrough, and I was unsure if there was a Gossip Stone here or not, and there's apparently not. So I was just confirming that, and I decided to take out my retribution on the busted butterflies for tricking me. Revenge is so sweet. Anyway, after getting the life tree sapling, you can speak with Lanayru if you want to, and he just explains that the life tree cannot grow in Lanayru. It's just too arid and deserty there. So you need to go find some place where the conditions are a lot more favorable for plants. So where do we know where we can plant a lot of things? You want to head back to Farron, and if you remember from earlier, we actually had Groose telling us that he really, really wanted to plant a tree here in the sacred grounds inside the Seal Temple. So, you know, something I'm not sure about, like Groose has that whole conversation of saying how he really wants to plant something. It's an optional conversation, but it happens after Imprisoned 2. However, when you come to the Farron portion of the Song of the Hero, there's the Imprisoned 3 battle immediately. I'm not sure if you can actually leave. I think it's fine. I think you can actually exit through the side door and you could go out the other way. If you don't go into the sealed grounds, I think it's okay. That's what actually initiates the Imprisoned 3 battle. So I think you might be able to use the Gate of Time like this to plant the Life Tree sapling and do that before you ever do the Farron portion at all, I think. I don't think that Groose standing there is required at all for getting the Life Tree fruit. So I think it's okay. So if somebody wouldn't mind testing that in the comments and then letting me know, that'd be helpful. But just don't talk to Golo. That's the one thing you don't want to do. He's evil. See here, you thought the big bad guy was bad news, but actually Golo, he's like the worst guy ever. Everybody hates Golo. So back in the past, you can also speak with Impa here, and she gives you another firm hint that you really need to go plant the seedling over in the sunny patch over here. So she is expressing that she also wants to plant a tree here so that Zelda has a tree to welcome her when she finally wakes up. So that's all cool, and so that when you know what to do, all you have to do is run over to that and plant the seedling, and then we can continue back to the present in order to see the full-grown tree.
Oh!
So next you can optionally speak with Groose to hear him expressing how much he likes the tree here. He always likes to stare at it and stuff, and his dialogue makes me a little bit unsure if he remembers the tree not being here or not. Like, because we went into the Gate of Time, we changed the past in a different way than Timeshift Stones. Like, I don't know if he just has no memory of the tree not being here, which is kind of weird because we remember the tree not being here. I don't know, a temporal paradox. If it, you know, like, we wouldn't even know to plant the tree if it was already a tree in the future before we ever planted the seed. I don't know. But then again, another way to solve temporal paradoxes is just to realize that us planting the seed is actually our past. Tricky, huh? Anyways, to get the life tree fruit, all you have to do is roll into the tree, or which is, I assume, what most players would do because we were trained to do that earlier in the game with that kid next to the tree with the sky stag beetle. But otherwise, you can use any of your other items, and I do like to use the bombs just because I find it silly. To collect the life tree fruit itself, you can just walk into it, which is totally boring and what I did in this recording. Otherwise, I usually stab it with my sword just because it's more fun. At this point, I think I got all bomb happy. I was just all pleased with myself with that butterfly thing. I thought it was super amusing at the time I was doing it. I don't know, I thought I'd try it, and it actually worked really well, and I managed to take out all the butterflies in one bomb pretty much, except for that one. But, so I was very pleased with myself, so I ended up, like, bombing a whole bunch of stuff for the rest of this playthrough. So a lot of the following recordings, I don't even remember what I ended up doing, but I think I used the bombs a lot. So just something to look forward to, using bombs in obscure situations. Oh yeah, case in point. So, anyways, another comment too. As long as we're here, if you did not get the Goddess Wall heart piece, now is a great time to talk with Golo, or not Golo. Don't talk to Golo. That's bad. Whatever his name is, Gorko. We like Gorko. So, anyways, with the life tree fruit now in hand, all you have to do is return to Lanayru and speak with Lanayru. Yes. Alright, so after speaking with Lanayru and receiving the final portion of the Song of the Hero, we now have everything we need to do here, and we can return to the sky and go return to Levias and Thunderhead to complete the Song of the Hero at long last. Sophia will appear and tell you as much. However, Lanayru also says that you should come back at a later time because he has some challenges prepared for you. And that's all true, except it's actually available right now. You don't actually have to return later. He's just saying that to encourage you to go get more pieces of heart or whatever. But you can totally do it right now, so that's what I'm actually going to do. I did save this for after the Farron and Eldin portions in case you wanted to get more goodies from Goddess Cubes and get more pieces of heart and stuff. But we are now finally ready to take on Lanayru's challenges. So Lanayru has two challenges available for us, and regardless of which one you do, you want to sit on the stool to replenish your life and save at the nearby bird statue. Then as far as Lanayru goes, he has two different challenges. One of them is to redo the Silent Realms. You can do any Silent Realms you've done so far, and they will allow you to earn either rupees or treasure, depending on how well you score. You also are trying, and you're just trying to see how fast you can do them, by the way, is how you get a good score. But you can also do them again to get Dusk Relics. So if you did not collect a lot of Dusk Relics when you were doing the Silent Realms before, this is a good opportunity to do that. And if you're trying to just specifically hunt for Dusk Relics, I'd recommend the Farron region because the Farron Silent Realm was the easiest. The other challenge, which is what we're here for, is Lanayru's Lightning Round, which is a boss rush mode, and the prizes for it are rupees, but otherwise there are two epic prizes which you can get, which is a Piece of Heart, which is the final one in the game, as well as the Hylian Shield, which is the most epic, most durable shield that you can get. So those are two awesome prizes, and that's what we're actually here for. This is probably one of the harder combat things in the entire game. We don't have any access to our adventure pouch at all, so you can't bring any, you don't get any of the benefits of like a heart medal, for example, so there's no recovery hearts from that. You can't use any potions, anything, or berries, anything like that does not work. So there are no recovery hearts, except as a comment, there for the earlier bosses, like the Girahim battle, Scaldera, there are some recovery parts on the side, but that is only for the earlier boss battles. The later boss battles don't have that option. So it's actually good to start with some of the later boss battles so that partway through your cycle you end up getting some of the easier bosses so you can recover with the recovery hearts on the side. That is, of course, only for regular mode because in hero mode you don't have access to recovery hearts anyway, but again, you don't have the adventure pouch. The adventure pouch is totally off limits for this. You can bring your sword and shield though, so because we have the Master Sword now, you fight some of the earlier bosses and you do a lot of damage to them, so that's great. Also, as far as a shield, I would recommend the Goddess Shield because if worse comes down to it, you can always just back up and wait for your shield to recharge, and then it'll be fine. It doesn't matter how much damage you take and stuff like that. Just use your shield a lot. That's actually a good point. You can deploy your shield early by just shaking the nunchuck, and then if they do hit you, they'll hit your shield. And just so if you can't quite time a sword attack right, at least they'll hit your shield instead and you don't take damage. Now, you can't take any adventure pouch items with you, but what you can do is you can drink a potion before you ever start the challenge. So you can drink a stamina potion or a guardian potion, and you can upgrade those with Birdie to make them last longer. So then you have the duration of that potion lasting while you are in the middle of the fights. And the duration is paused while you are talking with Lanayru and during cutscenes and stuff, so it actually lasts longer than you'd think. So if you're struggling with this, I would recommend that you actually drink a potion, probably like a guardian potion, and then take on the hardest boss battles that you really struggle with, and those are the ones you actually want to start with. I don't really have any specific advice for the bosses. Honestly, the strategies for them is the exact same as when we fought them in the temples. Kind of the only thing that's different is just the fact that we have an upgraded shield and an upgraded sword. Because we have the true Master Sword, we now have upgraded Skyward Strikes, and we do additional damage with our regular attacks. Now, that only really matters for the earlier bosses because you already have the upgraded Master Sword for the final bosses anyway, so it doesn't really change anything. So like the Girahim battle, the very first Girahim battle, for example, you just destroy him. He dies so fast because you do so much damage to him. So because we have the upgraded Skyward Strike so it charges faster, there's a couple interesting things you can do with the earlier boss battles that you couldn't before. So for the Scaldera fight, for example, we don't have access to the bow because they're limiting us to items that we had at the time. However, because I can charge up a Skyward Strike, I can shoot the eye directly. I don't actually have to wait to stun the boss. So for example, in this recording right here, I'm going to look towards the boss in a second, and part of the armor is already exposed, so the eye is looking at me from underneath where the armor would have been. So I can actually just charge up a Skyward Strike and shoot the eye directly right now, and that would totally work, and I could do damage to the boss without ever actually stunning him. Likewise, the upgraded Skyward Strike is kind of handy for the Tentless battle because it charges so fast, so it just makes it really easy. But definitely having the upgraded Skyward Strike, the boss battle that it affects the most, optionally if you decide to use it, it's kind of like a little Easter egg almost. We don't actually know why it does increase damage, but for the second phase of Koloktos, when you grab those giant swords and you use it to cut out its legs from under him and then break open the cage that's guarding its heart, you can actually drop the sword, back up a little bit, and use start charging up a Skyward Strike, and then stab forward to use a Skyward Stab. And what that will do is it will do something crazy like 8 damage to the heart. I don't know why it does so much damage. It's kind of nuts. But anyways, you can move through that entire phase in just one pass. So you don't have to cut out its legs out from under him multiple times. You just do it once, and then you're done. And it's honestly not that hard, actually. It's just unusual. It's not something you would normally think to do, but it is very effective and it works really well. So if you want to move through that phase a little bit easier, especially if you struggle with that whole phase and you're worried about taking additional damage from Koloktos, you can defeat him a lot faster doing that. Other than that, the only other thing to know is that you can only fight bosses you've already fought before. So we haven't actually gone to the last portions of the game yet, so there's actually a couple more boss battles that we haven't even seen yet. Lanayru will have access to those and will be able to fight them, but only after you fought them the first time. So I don't actually have access to a couple of the bosses. And one final note about that is in hero mode, you can actually also use Lanayru's challenge to fight the final boss of the game, but in the regular mode, you don't have access to that with Lanayru at all. So I'm not going to show the actual footage in this particular video. I do have 45 minutes or something like that of me fighting the bosses, but it's all the exact same strategies, and I already talked about it super thoroughly in the walkthrough earlier. So again, if you want to see those detailed strategies, please just refer to the previous videos. I'll have links to each one of the boss battles in the description. So if you want to see where those particular boss battles are, I'll just have a link to the YouTube video with the exact timestamp, so it takes you directly there so you can see that boss battle and get the tips you need. And like I say, other than those few differences that I mentioned a little bit ago, the battles are the exact same, so that's why I'm doing it that way. So, as far as prizes, how this game works is you do get just a little bit of, I think you get 50 rupees or something like that every time that you complete a boss that you haven't fought before. So the first time you fight one of the bosses in his lightning round mode, whatever, you will get just some bonus rupees just straight up. But otherwise, you will also build up prize money. And how that works is it goes up exponentially, so you get a small amount of rupees, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And you can grab that prize pool, you can quit whenever you want, and accept the prize money. So that's how it works, and so if you die, you then lose all the prize money you would have gained. So the idea is you try and see how far you can get, and then you want to quit while you're ahead before you die. It's kind of the idea. So hopefully you get as far as you can to get a bunch of rupees. So I'm going to post the list of the prize money and the potential prizes on screen. So some of those are actually treasure if you end at specific points, which is cool as well. But what we're really here for is if the first time you end on prize number 4 and prize number 8 after completing 8 bosses, you will then get a Piece of Heart, which is the final one in the game, as well as the Hylian Shield. So those are the 2 prizes we're trying to get. So what you want to do is you want to play Lanayru's challenge until you get that Piece of Heart, and then we get the Piece of Heart first, by the way. So you actually get, that gives you a whole nother heart container to make his game a little bit easier. You know what I mean? So I'd recommend you actually go for the Piece of Heart first. What the Hylian Shield does, on the other hand, is it just has infinite durability, so it will never break, which is pretty cool. So you can always just use it preemptively. You can do this with any shield, really. You just, like, preemptively use a shield bash just to get your shield out, and then if an enemy hits you and you don't, like, retaliate in time or whatever, then the enemy will just hit your shield and you'll lose shield durability. But because the Hylian Shield has infinite durability, it'll never break anyway. So you can use this preemptively to just prevent incoming damage just in general. So that is a pretty sweet thing. It actually is pretty effective at that. However, as always, though, like, actually using a well-timed shield bash is always better. But you can still just get the shield out just in general, just to prevent damage. So it's more practical to use that with the Hylian Shield than any other shield in the game. And the other thing I will comment on is that the last boss of the game, having a shield for him is very, very helpful. And it so being able to have the Hylian Shield for that battle specifically is pretty cool. Well, that concludes everything we had to do in Lanayru, so it's time to go back to the sky. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you next time. Oh, oops. I totally forgot. You have this to block his shots. It's actually like one of the cool things about this particular shrine. I think actually you can lay down a shock weapon. Actually, wait a second, let's find out. Gotta think about this for a moment. Usually falls behind you. And now drop it while we're in the middle of charged. There you go. You can lure him onto it and he kills himself. It's great. Do I redo this one just to show that real quick? You know, why not? Why not? Let's do it. Major test of strength. This is so ridiculous. Never leave home without an electric weapon, right? This is obviously what they intended.